Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, members of parliament, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday afternoon, I returned from a trip to Egypt and Israel, and it was a trip right into the heart of one of the most serious crises that the Middle East has experienced in recent times. And it was very important for me to underscore, during my presence in Israel, what has also really been on the topmost of our minds in the last weeks. In these difficult times, our place is at the side of Israel. This trip and my conversations, amongst others with the King of Jordan, with the Emir of Qatar, and with the President of Egypt, I used it in order to speak out in favor of keeping this conflict limited in the region. A wider conflagration would be devastating for the entire region, and we all agree on that. And therefore, it is also dependent upon the fact that we do everything to avoid a wider escalation, that there are no new steps and levels of escalations or an opening up of a confrontation in the north of Israel. And therefore, I reiterate what I've already said. There should no be entering of Hezbollah, Iran, or other proxies in this war. It would be a grave mistake. And I'm also very content also about the fact that the conversations that I had with the Israeli president, with the president of Egypt, and also with the new members of the Israeli government, that all of this has contributed to a better mutual understanding, a deepening also of the understanding of what has to be done, but also to really delineate the steps that have to be taken. One of these tasks that we all have to take upon ourselves is to make sure that the hostages are liberated without any preconditions. And therefore, it was very important for me to also speak to relatives of the hostages in Tel Aviv. It was really incredibly difficult also to listen to all the pain and the difficulties that these members of the families and friends have experienced. But it is really something that gripped me, because you really sense their anguish and their fear. And therefore, for those who also preach against the terror, many of those who were actually abducted were also those who spoke up against division and for a mutual understanding between Israel and Palestinians. And that also has to be stressed. But it is also about humanitarian aid for the citizens in Gaza, because they are also victims and they are also hostages of Hamas. They're not just used as a shield to protect them in this conflict, as a kind of human shield. You cannot describe it as anything else, but they actually practically have staged a coup and are therefore also completely at the mercy of the terror of Hamas. And therefore, it is very, very important that we find ways to provide humanitarian help. I talked to the Israeli government, with the King of Jordan, with the President of Egypt, and altogether we tried to explore ways to make it possible. The American president was in Israel and also talked about this point, and I have the impression that it could be possible, despite all the difficulties, to find a way so that the most needed goods essentials can be delivered to Gaza, because this is also part of the picture, because we need to be very clear also that Israel has every right to defend itself, but we also are very clear in our conversations with our friends in Israel that humanitarian aid is also part of the picture, and Israel, together with Israel, we will do everything to make this possible. It is very clear that we must not look away in our own country. Anti-Semitism has no place in Germany, and we will do our utmost to oppose anti-Semitism. We will do so as citizens, as those who are also carrying responsibility, but also when it comes to implementing the law. We must not allow, for example, meetings and assemblies where anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic statements can be made. All of that cannot be accepted here, and we need to draw a clear line here, and we need to stand together in Germany. We also talked about these issues in Europe. And there were conferences. There was a joint declaration of the European Council at the weekend. And yesterday, it was the case that we faced a situation, or actually the day before yesterday, where we debated amongst each other. I was able to dial in to a meeting of the European Council from Tel Aviv, and it was very clear, the statement that we stand united at the side of Israel. We will continue to do so, and we will continue to debate about this at the European Council level. I'm also very touched by the fact that the Israeli president has found clear words about this war and the victims, because this is very important, because it is also a clear voice speaking to those who are exposed to violence coming from outside and who need to be supported. But I am also really outraged at the fact that the Russian president is guarding against the fact that there might be civilian victims of this war. I think this is really cynical, and it goes without saying, really, that it is cynical. Within the European Council, we will be debating about our further steps, how we can support Ukraine, and it will certainly also be about how we can do the necessary things in order to face this winter. We are also setting up a winter package, including numerous aspects involving everything also that is important for air defense, and we making sure also that an additional Patriot unit will be delivered, new Gepard and munitions and ordnance are delivered. All of that is part and parcel of it in order to ensure that Ukraine can defend itself against these terrible missile attacks, its attacks against the infrastructure, the civil infrastructure of Ukraine. We will not let up in our efforts to support them. And in Europe, we will also have to debate about the financial help for the budget of Ukraine. One topic, talking about the medium-term financial framework, and we have a very clear position. This help for Ukraine, for the financial stability of the country, has to be guaranteed by Europeans jointly. And it is even more important, or all the more important, that we debate about, obviously, that it's not just about how much money all the additional problems in Europe require, but it is also important to really think about solving the issues. And that is what we in Germany stand for. And we will also be talking about questions about the future of Europe, and I'd like to briefly touch upon it now, because it will be a topic on the European Council meeting. How can we increase the competitivity of the European industry? And we will lead a lot of activities in that sense. And the European Commission, and I'm very pleased about this, is presenting proposals to reduce red tape. And I will do my utmost to make sure that this is not just lip service, but that it will really become European legislation. And I'm encouraged by the fact that we are supported by our French friends in Hamburg at the Franco-German summit. We spoke explicitly also about the reduction of bureaucracy in Europe, and this will be a joint project of France and Germany, and hopefully beyond that of the entire European Union. And because we haven't yet finished all of the projects that we are looking at, and also regarding the crises that we have faced, first the pandemic, the corona pandemic, and then the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, it's very, very important that the subsidy reforms that we wish to implement are really implemented and become a tool for the future. And therefore, I am also speaking up in Brussels in favor of extending these tools until 2027. We're experiencing challenging times. I already spoke about the wars, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, the war that Hamas triggered with a terrible terrorist attack, killing and maiming citizens in Israel. But there are other challenges as well, and one of the major challenges that we're facing is dealing with irregular migration, with a large number of people who are seeking shelter in Europe, some of whom actually receive shelter in Europe because they also fulfill the norms and standards and rules that we've set up. But there are many, many more who do not comply or who do not actually fulfill these rules. And therefore, it's important to make sure that at every level we do the utmost in order to ensure that irregular migration to Europe and Germany is limited, that we manage this as a group of states, and that we maintain the control instead of losing it. One of the tall challenges is really to protect the external borders of the European Union, and we will support those states that are on that outer boundary, and we will make sure that European institutions also contribute, and we will give them the legal tools that they need in order to do so. And one of the great reforms that is now becoming reality is the reform of the joint European asylum system. And at this point, I would like to state that this reform that during many, many years was stagnant, was not managed, was not made reality. This reform has now become reality. Why? Because it was possible also through the passionate commitment of our Minister for Interior Affairs to get the ball rolling and to make this project reality. We have a large parliamentary group with many former interior ministers, and they certainly tried but failed. So now, finally, things are coming together. So it's the first time in many, many years that it has really become possible for the ministers of interior in Europe to come up with a decision on all aspects linked to that, and we can rest assured that in negotiations in Parliament we will also be able to achieve an agreement. And I will state very clearly what is at stake here. This is a European solidarity mechanism where countries of that are living secondary migration, Austria, Germany, the Scandinavian countries, and many other countries are actually experiencing that many of those who are showing up at our borders have actually traveled through many other countries without being registered. That was the reality, and this is being changed with this agreement and the tools linked to this. Everybody has to be registered in their countries of first arrival, and this is a great step forward that is clearly in our interest. And linked to that is an possibility to have a solidarity exchange, because that is necessary if everybody is registered, and that we can also send people back who, in accordance with the Dublin rules, cannot stay here, and we can improve that. But it is also clear that for those who have no great prospect of staying, whose appeals for asylum have been dealt with or will be dealt with at the borders themselves. And all of that is already being enshrined in this package, and I'm very confident that we will progress on this path. Ladies and gentlemen, we also need to make sure that we do not close our eyes towards the situation, and that is why we've closed and we've actually controlled, the borders to our neighbors such as Austria, Switzerland and Poland, and we've done so in close cooperation with police forces of our neighboring countries, and that has been very, very effective. But also in Germany we need to strengthen these controls, and we will mobilize more police units in order to do so, and this is something that we want to do, and we will notify the European Union about this. The protection of German borders is a task that this government takes seriously, sees, and will follow through with. And regarding the other points that we are determined to implement is the acceleration of migration and asylum processes here in this country, and that is why the spring agreement that we came to about with the federal states has to be implemented and will be pursued further. And it includes the large repatriation package that we are setting up and that we will be putting before the Parliament and can be decided before the end of the year. It will allow us to identify people more easily. It will allow us to repatriate people more rapidly. It will allow us also to process people much more quickly. All of those are measures that are necessary also in order to dampen down on people smuggling and organized crime in this respect. So all of that is part and parcel of what we intend to do. And we also want to achieve that administration processes are accelerated. That is not the case. That is no longer the case, such as it is today in Rhineland-Palatinate, that if somebody provides or submits a complaint against their asylum determination or the decision on their asylum status, that they can then complain, and it takes 3 to 4 months until it is actually deliberated. So the application for asylum and the decision are to be taken at once in the primary process, and that is what we have decided together with the federal states, and it will accelerate all of the processes that we are engaged in. And this includes Moldavia and Georgia that are also candidates to become members of the European Union are to be determined as safe countries of origin. This is something that we have decided. This is something also that we in the Bundestag and in the Federal Bundesrat have also agreed upon. And this also includes that we will have a majority also in the Bundesrat, in the second chamber. And this is an important step that we have taken now after years, because these are safe countries of origin and there must not be any equivocation when people from these countries come to the European Union. The most important thing that we need for the future is migration agreements. And that is the decisive difference vis-à-vis everything that has been done in the past couple of years. In many countries, there are politicians who try to put themselves forward by claiming that they can repatriate people into the countries where they come from. And even in those cases, we see that there's an increase in migration in their country because they are not able to set up a good line of communication to those countries of origin. And therefore, those migration partnerships are what we need in order to ensure that we don't just have statements of repatriation, but that we make sure that those people are actually repatriated and brought back to the countries from where they have come. Because now we have something to offer, because with the changes that we have with our labor migration opportunities, we say that we are opening a direly necessary pathway for talents and skilled labor to come to Germany. We need them so that our industries and our economy continue to grow, and we make at the same time, and we make sure at the same time sure that those people are repatriated that have to be repatriated, and as quickly as possible. And we are negotiating with many governments. The rapporteur on this for the federal government has already provided first steps and conclusions with 6 different countries. There's a huge interest also for this program, and there is also a willingness on both parts to come to an agreement with us. And that is a huge step forward, and it would be a huge change. And I have to add that I have asked German diplomats and German ministers who engage in conversations with their counterparts abroad that they always touch upon this topic, and that they make sure that those who are to be repatriated are really then taken back by their countries of origin. Ladies and gentlemen, many citizens complain, and many representatives, municipalities and mayors tell me that it just can't be the case, that on the one hand side there is a huge demand for labor, and that those who are then there are not allowed or afforded the opportunity to work. And therefore we will adopt measures to make that possible. We will further and broaden the possibilities for those who are already present in our country to work. We will try and reduce the red tape on that and make sure that it also happens. We will start an offensive, so to speak, an initiative so as to make sure that Ukrainian citizens who are here and who have engaged in language courses can speedily accede to the labor market. And we will make our utmost to make sure that whatever the municipalities wish to undertake in this sense is supported. I really welcome the fact that if there is a labor offered locally, and I also support the fact that if certain services are offered, that this is enshrined in law. And I would also support the federal states if they want to develop a joint payment card in order to facilitate things. And all of that is part and parcel of our project, and this will certainly also lead to a concrete support on the part of the federal government for those who wish to push the envelope. And at this point, I would like to stress that we need to cooperate. And therefore, I was very, very pleased about this conversation that I had with the 2 speakers of the Minister Conference, Mr. Weil and Mr. Merz. I think it is a topic where we can have objective conversations involving both government and the opposition. We can carry that also into the federal states and municipalities. And I have the impression that there is a new willingness to cooperate here, and I would like to express my gratitude for that. Finally, the citizens expect humanity and order. They expect our levels of government to ensure this, and we will continue to ensure this. This task has to be solved. We can solve it, and we can implement this with a very clear position and without any resentment. And that is what the citizens expect from us, and the federal government will do its part in order to ensure this. Thank you very much.
And you've been watching live coverage of German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's speech to the Bundestag, to the German Parliament, ahead of an EU summit coming up. He talked, of course, about what's going to be discussed at that EU summit, but he also related what transpired during his visit to Israel and Egypt. The Chancellor just returned from there. He met with the leaders of both Israel and Egypt, and he delivered a wide-ranging speech recounting his talks there in the Middle East, but also what's coming up on the European agenda. He addressed Israel's confrontation with the Hamas militants, saying that Germany's place is at Israel's side. He warned Hezbollah in Iran to stay out of the conflict and that his main priority is to contain that conflict. He also drew attention to the need to supply humanitarian aid to Gaza. Our correspondent, Michaela Kufner, our chief political editor, is down at the Bundestag, was following the Chancellor's speech, joins us now. Michaela, what struck you about the Chancellor's speech?
Well, usually ahead of an EU summit, he maps out what's on the to-do list. And today we got a summary, what from a German, actually European perspective, are the big challenges of our time, with the exception of climate change. That wasn't mentioned, but these are the big conflicts. And what struck me is that after once again pledging that Germany is at the side of Israel in these times of need, that humanitarian access and assistance to the Palestinians was a key focus there, something he stressed that he had raised, but also US President Joe Biden had raised with Israel. So that is something that also got quite a bit of applause here in Parliament. And he also mentioned Ukraine. He basically went through the list. For instance, there's an additional Patriot system that Germany will be supplying that was also previously announced, of the support for Ukraine, basically saying that that must not be affected by this new crisis. But also, and now looking at the European Union, that EU leaders have to reprioritize where they will be spending their money because the funding will simply not be enough. And I think this is a very interesting challenge that he is taking to the European Union, and also a German position that he is expected to push very strongly.
It was a wide-ranging speech, a whole lot packed into this, dealing with the events unfolding in the Middle East that's top of everyone's minds at the moment. But again, the European Union is there. The war in Ukraine is still happening, and so he touched on everything dealing with that. But looking specifically at what's happening in the Middle East right now, Michaela, the Chancellor tried to balance Germany's commitment to helping Israel defend itself, but also to humanitarian interests of the people in Gaza. He described the people in Gaza themselves as being hostages of Hamas, the civilians there. Give us some more of the nuances that came through in the Chancellor's speech regarding what's happening in the Middle East.
Yes, well, he clearly differentiated here, and I would expect he did so also in the talks that he held with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, but also President al-Sisi of Egypt. He clearly distinguished between the Palestinians and Hamas, hence describing the Palestinians as a hostage of this terrorist organization, which is also listed as such here within the European Union. And he made very clear that humanitarian assistance is an imperative, essentially, is something that must take place. At the same time, we heard the German Chancellor pledge in Israel, but also in Parliament here previously, that the security of Israel is reason of state. And that means that it's a fundamental principle of state action, of state policy here in Germany. So that is something that is non-negotiable. And that is the very difficult line that the German Chancellor is treading here. He was still received by the Egyptian president. Germany has some credibility in the region also because it has always pushed for humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian civilians there. Now that assistance is under renewed scrutiny over concerns that some funding might be directed towards Hamas. And at this moment of acute conflict, Germany is doing both. It is saying that it is unequivocally standing by the side of Israel, which also could mean any kind of assistance Israel may require. That's very limited at the moment. 2 drones leased by Germany will now remain in Israel instead of being delivered here. And at the same time, reminding Israel, together with the United States, of the humanitarian needs for the Palestinian people.
I thought it was interesting that the Chancellor went directly from talking about events unfolding in the Middle East to the Ukraine war, and he took a swipe at Russian President Vladimir Putin while making that transition. Tell us a little more about that, Michaela.
Yes, he described it as absolutely cynical, that it was, out of all people, now Russian President Vladimir Putin, who came out with concerns over civilian casualties. This after Russia, of course, started waging war on Ukraine, which is now more than 1.5 years ago. It's going into its second winter with thousands of civilians killed. And this is all against the backdrop of what we're seeing happening before our very eyes right now, a new alliance, it appears, between Russia and China, who are coming down very heavily on the side of the Palestinians and the traditional West, almost, with Germany, but the United States aligning with Israel. And of course, it is a lot more complicated than that, but it is quite striking that Russia and China now see the need to really take sides in conflicts where they've kept some distance in the past. So it appears that part of the strategy could be to stretch Western support for Ukraine and for Israel to its limits. And that's a point that the US President Joe Biden has made in the past, but the German Chancellor here is making as well. That will not, it must not happen. And it could mean that the European has to decide on new priorities. And that could mean taking a lot of money out of what is its biggest spending still, which is agricultural subsidies. He didn't mention these, but I would expect that to be very much at the heart of the discussion when EU leaders meet.
Michaela, thank you very much. That was our chief political editor, Michaela Kufner, down at the Bundestag.